Imagine you're down to your last $900 desperate and facing homelessness after losing everything in the latest devastating market crash. Would you risk it all on an abandoned farm that locals whisper is cursed? That's exactly what Andrew Pierce did buying a rundown property. No one else dared touch. But what he discovered hidden deep beneath the rotting floorboards and in a forgotten attic changed his life forever, pulling him into a gripping conspiracy involving secret experiments, mysterious underground vaults, and a fortune that powerful people would do anything to hide. If you love heart-pounding tales of grit, courage, and classic American resilience, think Clint Eastwood facing impossible odds. Stay tuned to see how this unbelievable story unfolds. Don't forget to subscribe and follow along. This is one thriller you won't want to miss. Andrew Pierce sat in his aging sedan, parked on a side street near the county courthouse, staring at the meager balance in his checking account on his phone, $982.36. That was all he had left in the world. Just 3 years earlier, he had been a successful financial advisor, a man with a swanky, high-rise office, lucrative clients, and a healthy portfolio that easily cleared 7 figures. He and his then-wife, Leslie, had lived in a stylish downtown condo, hosting parties for fellow professionals and prospective clients. There had been extravagant dinners, weekend getaways, and an ever-present sense of security, all of which had evaporated during a catastrophic market collapse that left Andrew not just broke, but practically homeless. Once the downturn began, Andrew's over-leveraged positions started eating through all his assets at a breathtaking speed. As the market continued its relentless plummet, his clients withdrew. His reputation tanked, and legal battles devoured the last remnants of his savings. Eventually, even the condo was gone along with Leslie. She had left, taking what little remained of their shared funds, declaring she could no longer prop up Andrew's pride or his insatiable appetite for risk. At the age of 43, he was effectively living in his car. He showered at a local gym whenever he could, and that small plastic card in his wallet had been declined at more places than he cared to admit. He had grown up in a rural region on a small tract of farmland, an hour outside the city, that his parents had eventually sold off. But he'd fled those humble roots in his late teens, dreaming of the big city and fast success. By the time the markets collapsed, he'd forgotten the straightforward lifestyle of early mornings, fresh air, and tangible rewards of physical labor. Andrew knew now was a quiet desperation. He needed a place to stay, to regroup, to start over. He found himself at the courthouse because of a flyer advertising several property auctions. With little else to do that afternoon and a nascent spark of hope that maybe there was an unclaimed piece of cheap land he could afford, Andrew decided to investigate. He expected these seized properties or foreclosures to command more money than he had, especially if any were within commuting distance to a major city. Nevertheless, he was desperate enough to look. Inside the stuffy auction room, he waded through a list of properties posted on a bulletin board. Most had starting bids in the tens of thousands, some in the hundreds of thousands. He skimmed through them, his heart sinking further with each new set of zeros he encountered. But then one listing snagged his attention. Abandoned farm towns and farmhouse. Minimum bid, $900. The photograph stapled to the listing revealed a dilapidated 2-story home, its exterior paint peeled away in swathed, shutters hanging at odd angles, and the surrounding fields choked with weeds. It looked grim, but the price was unbelievably low. Maybe people assumed the property was worthless, or maybe the damage was so severe that demolition was imminent. Andrew didn't know, but he did know that $900 was just within his means. It meant nearly emptying his account. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a pulse of excitement. If he could win the bid, he would at least have a roof over his head. Perhaps, just perhaps, this might be the lifeline he needed. The next morning, Andrew arrived at the auction hall early, feeling the familiar churn of nerves in his stomach. He looked remarkably out of place among the more seasoned bidders. Local landlords, real estate speculators, and a few curious onlookers, hoping to snag a decent house below market value. The Townsend farm was one of the last on the docket that day. Property after property came up, each one reaching a bid far beyond Andrew's capacity. Small suburban homes going for $50,000, $60,000 or more. Time stretched on, and he found himself tapping his foot anxiously on the worn courthouse floor. The entire setting had the faint echo of his past life. People vying for deals, scanning for opportunities, though on a much smaller scale than the corporate environments he once navigated. Finally, the auctioneer called for bids on Lot 17, the official designation for the Townsend farm. The auctioneer began rattling off what he knew. An abandoned property in unincorporated Millbridge County, located approximately 60 miles from the city, two-story farmhouse, outbuildings. Uncertain structural stability, sold as is. Andrew's heart pounded when the auctioneer asked if anyone wished to open the bidding. At first, the silence was thick. The scattered crowd exchanged glances as if the property were a well-known curse. Andrew recalled that the flyer had mentioned a Townsend farmhouse and some note about it having sat empty for 20 years. But he hadn't heard more than that. He cleared his throat and mustered his courage. $900, he said. His voice sounded smaller in that space than he had hoped, almost an apology. Heads turned, eyebrows rose. He could see a few amused or pitying smiles from those who wondered why he'd waste money on what was likely a money pit. The auctioneer paused, scanned the room, and in a slightly baffled tone repeated, $900. Do I hear 1,000? Silence. Andrew's heart hammered. No second bid came, and he realized he might actually get it for that absurd price. Going once, going twice, the gavel struck. Sold to the gentleman in the back. Andrew hardly remembered stepping forward to sign the paperwork, his hands shaking as he wrote down the last digits of his bank account. The county clerk, a weary-looking woman with a kindly smile, slid the documents over. "Well, Mr. Pierce," she said, "this is certainly something." Then she lowered her voice. "You do know that place has quite the reputation. Old Harold Townsend was rumored to be involved in questionable dealings, and folks say he was unpleasant. Some even claimed the place was cursed." Andrew forced a weak grin and shrugged. "I don't believe in curses. Just opportunities," he replied. Yet as he walked out with the official deed in his hands, it felt surreal. Had he truly just spent nearly his last dollar on this battered relic of a farm? By mid-afternoon, Andrew was driving the 60-mile stretch toward his newly acquired property. The city soon gave way to rolling farmland, some well-kept, others left to the ravages of time and neglect. His old life in finance seemed a distant memory. He passed roadside farm stands, a dilapidated drive-in theater, and a scattering of small towns that looked like they hadn't changed in decades. As he got closer, a sense of foreboding welled up unbidden. What if the farmhouse was irreparable, a lost cause? Or worse, what if he had just thrown away his last chance? When he reached the long gravel driveway, a rusted metal mailbox announced Townsend in peeling letters. Weeds grew tall on either side of the path, brushing against the undercarriage of his car. Andrew steered cautiously, glimpsing the silhouettes of derelict barns and toppled fences in the distance. At the driveway's end, perched on a gentle rise of land, stood the house, an imposing, forlorn structure of warped planks, chipped paint, and windows that looked more like vacant eyes than portals to a home. Despite the mild weather, the sight of it sent a chill through him. He parked near the front porch, a structure so sagging he was unsure it would support his weight. At least he'd have 4 walls and a roof, he told himself. But it was hard to ignore the reality. The porch steps were partially rotted, and an old rocking chair sat askew as if its owner had abandoned it mid-rock decades ago. Dead vines clung to the siding, and the yard was strewn with debris, broken shingles, twisted wire fragments of rusted metal. He reminded himself that this was better than living in his car. Still, a nagging voice asked if it truly was. He took a deep breath, grabbed his lone suitcase and a heavy-duty flashlight, then approached the front door. It creaked ominously, protesting his entry. The interior smelled of rotten dust, the stale odor of a structure left to the mercy of time and the elements. Fallen plaster littered the floor and cobwebs draped the corners. He flicked on the flashlight. Its narrow beam revealed sagging floorboards, tattered wallpaper and furniture that looked as though it had endured generations of neglect. In what might once have been a living room, a lopsided couch and a battered coffee table sat coated in dust. A single unbroken window let in the last vestiges of daylight, illuminating floating motes that danced in the still air. Andrew tested the stairs leading to the second floor. They groaned under his weight, but he guessed they'd hold for now. Upstairs, he found 2 bedrooms and a small bathroom. The only living creature to greet him was a startled mouse that scampered beneath a door. After a cursory inspection, Andrew decided to set up camp downstairs. Choosing a relatively intact corner of the living room floor, he unrolled a threadbare sleeping bag and used his jacket as a pillow. The disconcerting quiet of the place, punctuated by random creaks, kept him on edge. Yet exhaustion soon claimed him, and he drifted into a fitful sleep. Morning arrived in a gentle haze of sunlight through the grimy windows, illuminating the scope of the disarray. Andrew woke stiff and mildly regretful, but tried to focus on possibilities. He had bought this place to have something, anything that was his. determined not to wallow. He spent the first few hours taking a more thorough inventory. The main floor boasted a living area, a dining room, a kitchen with ancient appliances, and a small windowless room that might have been an office or storage space. Most of it was worthless junk, but he recognized that the bones of the house seemed salvageable. The roof from the outside looked to be in one piece. Though that was an optimistic glance, the foundation appeared stable. No obvious cracks or sinking. The plumbing and electricity would definitely need massive overhauls, but he wasn't entirely clueless. He'd grown up helping his father fix things around a modest property, though not nearly at this scale. He rummaged through every kitchen cabinet, half hoping to find a stray can of food or any sign that a more recent visitor had left something useful. Instead, he discovered mostly empty shelves, rodent droppings, and rusted cookware. The electricity, as expected, was off. When he tried the faucets, they sputtered air and a bit of rusty water before dying. It would be a monumental task just to make this place livable. But at least it's mine, he said aloud, the sound echoing off empty walls. By midday, Andrew decided to explore outside. The neglected fields stretched around him like a wool blanket, gone to seed, tall grass, invasive plants, small saplings that had taken hold where farmland once existed. He envisioned the farm's heyday, fresh rows of crops, maybe livestock roaming. It wasn't hard to picture it, especially when he stumbled upon what must have been a vegetable garden behind the house. Faint outlines of planting, rows hinted at tomatoes, peppers, and other produce that had thrived here long ago. Beyond that stood a barn, its roof partially caved in, doors hanging off their hinges. Inside, old farm tools lay in heaps of rust, shovels, hose, a broken wheelbarrow. In one corner, Andrew discovered a generator with a manufacturer's date, at least 30 years old. It was caked in grime, a side panel was missing, and he found a half-chewed wire, yet the spark of possibility remained. If it could be repaired, he might at least have a temporary power source. He spent the rest of the day cleaning out a small area in the barn, hoping to find salvageable items. Dust motes swirled around him in the fading light, the silence broken only by the wind whistling through cracks in the walls. By dusk, Andrew felt weary, but oddly gratified, as if he had made a small dent in years of accumulated neglect. With a better sense of what he faced, he resolved to keep going. He had nowhere else to turn, and if nothing else, the manual labor steadied his restless mind. On his second night, Andrew slept somewhat more peacefully. Physical exhaustion was a better sedative than any sleeping pill he could imagine. Waking just after dawn, he decided it was time to tackle the second floor more thoroughly. Though the steps still creaked ominously, he felt more confident in their stability after a day of wandering all around them. Upstairs, he noticed a hallway that he had barely glanced at the day before. Two doors stood at either end. One led to a bedroom containing a rickety bed frame and a tall wardrobe missing its doors. The other door was jammed, swollen by years of humidity. After a few solid shoves, it finally gave way, with a crack revealing a cramped linen closet full of decaying sheets and blankets that had long since been claimed by mice. Yet to his surprise, there was also a small door in the ceiling, above the hallway, the entrance to the attic. A fold-down ladder was tucked neatly, though precariously, into the frame. Dust practically rained down when he tugged on the handle, and the ladder's hinges squeaked so loudly that he feared they might snap. He hesitated. Who knew what might be living up there? Raccoons, bats, or some other creature. Might not appreciate a visitor, but curiosity outweighed caution. Grabbing his flashlight and a small wrench he'd found in the barn, Andrew carefully tested each rung before ascending. The attic was stifling, the air thick with dust. It felt like stepping into a forgotten world, as if no one had set foot here for decades. Old trunks, furniture draped in musty sheets, and piles of newspapers were strewn about. The single window, clouded with dirt, allowed a small shaft of daylight to guide him. He coughed, eyes watering, and lifted an old tablecloth to see what lay beneath. The first piece of furniture he uncovered was an ornate wooden chair, its upholstery stained and threadbare. Then he found a box filled with old family photographs, black and white images of stern-faced people standing in front of what looked like this very house, except in far better condition. He noted one man with a hawk-like expression and severe posture. The back of the photo read Harold Townsend, 1962. Beneath a toppled dresser, Andrew discovered a large frame portrait. It depicted the same man, Harold Townsend, standing in front of the farmhouse. Andrew felt a strange prickle of unease, as though the subject's painted eyes followed him. He slid the painting aside, noticing that the wooden floorboard behind it seemed loose. Kneeling, he pried at the plank, which shifted suspiciously. With a little more effort, the board lifted, revealing a shallow recess containing a small metal lockbox. The sight of it made Andrew's heart hammer. What could be inside old coins? Family heirlooms. He found a crowbar among the attic junk and pried the box open. He was not prepared for what he saw. Multiple stacks of bundled cash, faded but undeniably real. He thumbed through the top bills, fives, tens, 20s, and even older notes dated to the 1950s and 1960s. There had to be thousands of dollars here. Carefully, he pulled out the entire stash. Tucked beneath the bills was a small leather-bound notebook, brittle with age. Andrew's breath caught as he realized his desperate purchase might hold a secret far more valuable than he had ever dared to imagine. His hands trembled as he counted the money. 5,000 in one bundle, 4,000 in another, plus more scattered. By the time he tallied it all, it came to just over $50,000. In an instant, he had gone from having fewer than $1,000 in his bank account to finding a hidden fortune in the dusty corner of his attic. Yet, as exhilarating as this discovery was, something about the hush of the attic and the imposing portrait of Harold Townsend gave Andrew pause. This had clearly been left here for a reason, hidden deliberately. Whose money was it really? Did it still belong to some heir of the Townsend family, or was it legally his since it was found on property he now owned? Pushing those questions aside for a moment, he carefully examined the small leather notebook. The handwriting was cramped, and he recognized dates going as far back as 1960. At first glance, it seemed to be a journal of daily events, references to shipments, notes about meeting R or B. At certain times, cryptic mentions of a group called the Brotherhood One, scrawled sentence caught his eye. The fortune here is just the tip of the iceberg. The real secret is buried deeper, waiting for the right person to unlock it. Another page mentioned a map that had been hidden in a place only a true successor would look. Andrew felt a chill. A secret group, hidden wealth, and a cryptic map. He was way out of his depth. Or was he? His life had been battered by financial ruin, and he had wanted a second chance. Perhaps this was it, albeit cloaked in mystery. Just then a noise from outside startled him. It sounded like a car engine. Startled, Andrew realized he'd left the front door wide open. He quickly replaced the floorboard, recovered the painting, and slipped the lockbox under his arm, scurrying down the fold-out attic ladder. Looking out a front window, he saw a battered pickup rolling to a stop near the sagging porch. A man stepped out, lean, tall, late 50s or early 60s, wearing worn boots, faded jeans, and a short-brimmed cap. Andrew's immediate instinct was caution. Who was this stranger and why had he come? He set the lockbox on a kitchen shelf behind a stack of yellowed plates and stepped outside to greet the visitor. The man raised a hand in a friendly gesture. "Morning," he called out. "Name's Marvin Halston. I've got the farm over that way." He nodded, indicating a stretch of land beyond Andrew's overgrown fields. "Saw some signs of activity here, and figured I'd say hello. Surprised me when I learned someone finally bought this old place." There was no hostility in Marvin's tone yet. Andrew sensed a deep wariness in the man's gaze, as though Marvin knew more about Townsend Farm than he let on. Andrew returned the greeting, carefully omitting his recent discovery of hidden cash and cryptic journals. Marvin's handshake felt like sandpaper. Years of farm labor etched into his palms. "So you're the new owner," he said, surveying the peeling paint and the battered porch with a half-smile. "Good luck with it." "You'll need it." He glanced around as if expecting to see more signs of renovation. Andrew shrugged, remaining non-committal. "Got it cheap at the auction," he said. "Figured I could fix it up, maybe do something useful with the land." Marvin nodded, a flicker of curiosity lighting his eyes. "Huh, most people around here know better than to touch the Townsend place. Heard it was too far gone. That old barn alone could cost a fortune to fix." Andrew bristled slightly at Marvin's tone, though he couldn't deny the truth. The property was in ruin, and he had no clear plan beyond basic survival. Still, he wasn't about to broadcast his financial desperation. "I've got some experience with repairs," he lied. Feeling a pang of guilt at the false confidence, Marvin didn't press the point. Instead, he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small business card. "If you need supplies or help, there's a hardware store in town. Walton's Tools. Frank Walton owns it. He's a decent fellow. Also, if you ever need a hand with something bigger, I can occasionally spare some manpower from my farm. As long as you don't mind returning a favor one day." Andrew thanked him, slipping the card into his pocket. The older man's kindness seemed genuine, but there was something unspoken. Marvin's gaze kept drifting toward the house, as if searching for signs of something else. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You know, Townsend was rumored to be into let's call it unusual business. Marvin's voice dipped lower. I never believed half the rumors, but there was talk of him hosting late-night visitors, strangers in fancy cars that nobody recognized. People said they saw lights in the barns at odd hours. Then after he vanished, the place just sat here rotting, passed along through the county's bureaucracy. Surprised no big developer scooped it up, but the stories kept them away, I guess. Andrew feigned mild interest. Really well. I haven't seen any ghosts yet, he joked though. Inside, he wondered about the significance of the Brotherhood references in the diary. Could be that the rumors were just that, rumors. Marvin studied him a moment before relaxing his posture. Probably, he conceded. Anyway, watch your step. This house might have more surprises than broken floors. He turned to go, then paused. If you ever need advice, swing by. I'm up early, bed late. Farming's a never-ending job. With that, he climbed back into his truck. Andrew stood on the porch watching as the vehicle bounced down the weed-choked driveway. As the dust settled, he mulled over Marvin's veiled warning and the mention of Harold Townsend's unusual business. Deep inside, Andrew felt a mixture of trepidation and excitement. The lockbox hidden in his kitchen and the old journal upstairs pointed to a history that might be far more interesting and perilous than he'd anticipated. He resolved to tread carefully. That evening, Andrew's mind was aflame with questions. Instead of dwelling on hypothetical dangers, he decided to confront his newly uncovered mystery head-on. In the fading twilight, he retrieved the lockbox from its hiding place, spreading its contents on the worn kitchen table. He lit a lantern he'd found in the barn. The dancing flame cast flickering shadows across the banknotes in the little journal. Taking a deep breath, he began reading more intently, flipping through the journal's aged pages. The entries were sporadic, like short memos, rather than a daily diary. There were references to large sums of cash changing hands, product arriving at night, and cryptic mentions of experiments. The names were typically reduced to initials, HT for Harold Townsend, BR for someone else, and repeated mention of the Brotherhood. At times, the writing lapsed into near paranoia. They are watching and I fear for my life if the authorities find out. One section made Andrew pause. James Pierce is out, bought him off. But if he betrays us, we have leverage. That single mention of a surname that matched Andrew's own was enough to send a shockwave through him. Pierce was his mother's maiden name, but he had also known other Pierces growing up. Could it be a coincidence? Another perplexing passage read, "Map to the real treasure is hidden. Only the rightful heir can find it. The attic box is merely a fraction." Andrew's pulse quickened. The rightful heir, the real treasure. Did that mean more money or something else entirely? The notion of a larger treasure might explain the reference to experiments and shipments. Possibly it wasn't about gold or silver. Maybe it was contraband like bootleg liquor, drugs, or stolen artifacts. He remembered Marvin's remark. People saw fancy cars visiting at night, smuggling some clandestine operation. The mere thought of it made his hands clammy. $50,000 was a lot for Andrew, but in the scheme of large-scale illegal operations, it might just be pocket change. Over an hour later, Andrew realized he'd barely scratched the surface of the journal's cryptic hints. He carefully placed the bills back in the lockbox and took them upstairs, deciding the attic might still be the safest spot. Before settling in for the night, he double-checked the doors and windows, even propping an old chair under the front doorknob. For good measure, sleep was hard to come by, though. Every creak of the house, every groan of wood made him wonder if someone was lurking outside, waiting to reclaim the hidden money or investigate Townsend's dark legacy. Part of him thought he should take the money and run, maybe find a decent motel, pay off some debts, start fresh somewhere else, but another part, an even stronger urge, told him he had stumbled on something bigger than a quick payday. The lure of unraveling the mystery pulled at him, and if the journal's mention of Pierce was more than a coincidence, maybe this entire discovery had a personal angle. As storm clouds gathered outside, Andrew heard distant thunder. Rain began to patter on the roof. Lying in his sleeping bag, gazing at the swirling shadows of the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a dramatic turn, one that he needed to see through no matter the risk. At dawn, Andrew's mind churned with strategy. He would secure the immediate necessities, food, water, a working power source before pursuing the deeper secrets hidden in the farm's past. Though he had some grocery items in a cooler in his car, they wouldn't last. He resolved to drive into Millbridge, the nearest town, to buy supplies and possibly glean more information about the farm's reputation. As he pulled out the gravel driveway crunched beneath his tires, and he cast a glance at the looming farmhouse in the rearview mirror. Something about it beckoned him to return. Millbridge was a modest town, its main street lined with old brick buildings. A hardware store, a small market, a diner, and a gas station seemed to form the nucleus of its commerce. Andrew parked in front of Walton's Tools, stepping inside to be greeted by the scent of sawdust and metal. Behind the counter stood a short, bespectacled man in his 70s. "Help you find something?" he asked, voice cracking with age. Andrew introduced himself, explaining that he'd purchased the old Townsend farm and was looking for basic repair materials, lumber nails, a hammer, some roofing patch, and a few plumbing fixtures. The man who introduced himself as Frank Walton raised an eyebrow. "Well, you've taken on quite the project, son," Frank said, shaking his head. "That place is a legend around here. Not necessarily a good one. Harold Townsend had a way of making people uneasy." Andrew could see that Frank expected him to inquire further. "So he took the bait. I've heard rumors. Care to fill me in?" Frank shrugged, busying himself with rummaging for items on Andrew's list. Supposedly he was into something big, maybe illegal. Most folks around here keep their distance. Some say the property itself is cursed. Others think it's just good old-fashioned small-town gossip. Either way, that farmhouse is more trouble than it's worth. He paused, giving Andrew a serious look. "But maybe you'll break that pattern?" "People who tried to renovate it in the past always left in a hurry." Andrew frowned at that last comment. "Others tried?" "Yeah, a few. They never stayed more than a month or two, complained of break-ins, strange noises, bizarre accidents. Then they just left everything behind." Frank paused, fiddling with a piece of receipt paper. "Look, I'm no superstitious guy, but for a place to go through multiple would-be owners in that short a time makes you wonder." And Dura, forced a smile, thanked the older man and paid for the supplies. From there, he stopped by the local diner, grabbing coffee and a sandwich, listening as locals gossiped about the city fellow who'd taken on the Townsend farm. He felt eyes on him, not all of them friendly, armed with groceries and tools. Andrew returned to the farm around midday. Although he couldn't dismiss the creepy aura in the local lore, he reminded himself he was doing this to survive. He unloaded his purchases, stacking lumber against the barn, placing new locks and nails in the kitchen. Only after he completed that chore did he venture back to the attic to retrieve the hidden lockbox, determined to keep it close until he better understood its significance. Late in the afternoon, as Andrew prepped wood for patching sections of the porch, he saw a cloud of dust rising from the driveway. Another vehicle was approaching. His heart quickened. Had Marvin returned, or was it someone new? A sleek black sedan emerged from behind the overgrowth. Definitely not Marvin's old pickup. Andrew set down his hammer, wiping sweat from his brow, and mentally steeled himself. The car parked and out stepped a man who looked to be in his early 60s. He wore khaki pants and a crisp polo shirt, the kind of attire one might see on a country club golf course. His silver hair was neatly styled, and he carried himself with an air of confidence bordering on entitlement. Approaching Andrew, he extended a hand. "Andrew Pierce, correct?" "I'm Richard Townsend," he said, emphasizing his last name. "My uncle was Harold Townsend." Alarm bells rang in Andrew's mind. So this was a family member, presumably with some stake in the property. Andrew forced a polite smile, shaking Richard's hand. "Yes, I purchased the farm at the county auction," he said, trying to gauge Richard's intentions. Richard's expression remained neutral, though Andrew noted the flicker of appraisal in his eyes as he surveyed the half-rotted porch and Andrew's half-finished patchwork. "I was informed someone finally bought the old family place," Richard continued, "and I had to see it for myself. It's been abandoned a long time." Andrew nodded. "Sure has. Trying to bring it back to life." Somehow, for a moment, Richard studied Andrew with a cool intensity I suspect you might have found certain. "Things in the house," he ventured, his tone tight. Andrew's stomach dropped. Did Richard already suspect the existence of the attic lockbox? Had he come to claim it? Andrew played dumb. "I found a lot of junk. Old newspapers, broken furniture. You name it." Richard's face betrayed a flash of impatience. "I'm referring to anything valuable. Documents, letters, maybe a sum of money left behind." Andrew maintained a level gaze. If there was any mention of that, it wasn't disclosed at the auction. For a moment, a tense silence held between them. Then Richard sighed, as though conceding some private battle. "All right, Mr. Pierce, let's be direct. My uncle was part of a network. Some called it the Brotherhood, and they financed various endeavors. Some of those endeavors were less than legal, involving clandestine research shipments of certain materials and large sums of money moving around under the table. When Harold disappeared decades ago, there were rumors about hidden cash or contraband left on the property. The county and a few unscrupulous opportunists Searched but found nothing. Now you show up and buy the place. He stared at Andrew pointedly, so I had to check for myself. Andrew's grip tightened on the porch railing. The mention of the Brotherhood and hidden funds mirrored what he'd read in Harold's journal. Richard Townsend's sudden appearance confirmed that not only was the rumor mill turning, but that the stakes might be higher than Andrew had ever imagined. He forced a calm tone. I appreciate the heads up, Mr. Townsend, but I assure you I'm just here to fix the farm and maybe start a small produce business. Richard's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that. Be cautious, he warned, stepping back toward his car. Secrets in that house run deep. The days following Richard Townsend's unexpected visit were marked by a tense vigilance that Andrew Pierce found both unsettling and strangely energizing. He'd always thrived on challenges, first in high-stakes finance, then in clawing his way out of financial ruin, and now it seemed he'd landed in a real-world puzzle with potentially grave consequences. Early each morning, he performed repairs on the farmhouse, focusing on what he called survival essentials. He installed new locks on the doors and secured the ground floor windows. Though the place was still far from livable by normal standards, no proper running water, no steady electricity, he at least wanted a modicum of protection from prying eyes. At the same time, he couldn't ignore the mysteries swirling around him. The journal he'd found continued to reveal murky details of clandestine operations. It hinted at smuggling, yes, but also at something more ominous. Experiments that required secrecy and large sums of cash. Andrew still couldn't shake the mention of a James Pierce in the text. Could there really be a family tie here, or was it just a bizarre coincidence? His grandmother's side had boasted a few Pierces, but no one in his immediate memory. His mother rarely spoke of the extended family. The only Pierce relatives he knew were second cousins in another state. Late one afternoon, Andrew decided to intensify his investigation of the property itself. The land around the farmhouse was extensive, including the dilapidated barn, a swath of weed-choked fields, a collapsed tool shed near the tree line, and an old orchard whose apple and pear trees had gone feral from neglect. The orchard drew him in first. Though thick undergrowth choked the rows, he could discern the ghosts of well-planned grids. Trees stood in disarray, their fruit small and worm-eaten. Yet amid the unkempt chaos, he spotted a cluster of battered wooden crates under a leaning apple tree. When he pried one open, he found glass vials with dried residue-like traces inside that made his heart pound. Why store vials in a crate under an apple tree? Could it be part of the product the journal mentioned? The orchard connected to a dense copse of trees that formed a partial boundary between his land and Marvin Halston's farm. At first glance, it was all bramble and thicket. But as Andrew walked further, he tripped over what felt like a hidden metal hinge. Pushing aside a tangle of weeds revealed a small rusted door in the ground, like the entrance to a storm cellar. Intrigued, Andrew tried to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. The latch was heavily rusted, the metal worn, but it seemed locked from the inside. He made a mental note to return with better tools and a crowbar. As dusk settled, he trudged back to the farmhouse, haunted by the sense that every new discovery only spawned more questions. He briefly considered calling Marvin to ask about the orchard or the strange ground door, but something held him back. Already too many people seemed interested in the property. What if Marvin, friendly as he'd been, was also keeping secrets? Andrew realized he needed more information before sharing anything further. That evening, Andrew lit the old lantern in the dining room, one of the least damaged spaces, and laid out the journal and notebooks on the dusty table. The slight flicker of flame made the pages seem alive, as if Harold Townsend's words were still throbbing with hidden urgency. Once again, he pored through the cramped handwriting, paying special attention to references about the operation. There were repeated mentions of certain shipments arriving under cover of darkness, references to vehicle convoys and coded labels such as H-37 or T-91. More than once, Andrew stumbled on a segment that described an underground extension used for discreetly moving goods. A certain entry read, "New route to orchard installed better concealment. Brother satisfied another, can't risk the main barn. After last inspection, must revert to orchard entry." Orchard entry. Andrew thought of that rusted door in the ground he'd found earlier. It must be part of this hidden route. Perhaps there was an entire tunnel system connecting different parts of the property. Then there was the repeated reference to Pierce. Some passages suggested a major falling out, but the text was maddeningly vague. Pierce threatened to expose everything if we push forward. Settled him with hush money, but he wants out. Can't trust him. Another note. Pierce's knowledge is too great. If he talks, the Brotherhood is finished. Must consider further measures. Andrew's gut churned at the hostility implied. If this was indeed some ancestor or distant relative of his, what had happened to that Pierce who threatened to talk? His eyes darted over another bit scrawled in the margin. No choice but to hide the valuables in multiple stashes. Attic box as small as fraction. Andrew paused. He had suspected as much. The $50,000, $1,000 might have been just a decoy or a partial deposit. The real question, where were the other stashes, and were they still there after so many decades? The orchard cellar door might be a clue. But what about the broader network the journal hinted at? The entire farm could be riddled with hidden spaces. Outside thunder rumbled softly, hinting at a brewing storm. As he listened to the low grumble, Andrew felt a potent mix of fear and exhilaration. On one hand, he was delving deeper into what appeared to be a criminal conspiracy that had ended in violence or disappearance. On the other, it was impossible to ignore the lure of more hidden money or contraband. Even if the stash wasn't purely financial artifacts, collectibles, or black market items, it could be worth a fortune. Yet the moral dilemma gnawed at him. If this brotherhood was involved in dangerous activities, smuggling hazardous substances, or carrying out unethical experiments, did Andrew really want to be the one to unearth it all? And if so, would he be turning himself into a target for those who had once protected Townsend's secrets? With lethal seriousness, he sat for a long while, letting the questions whirl in his mind. Eventually, he stood up, blew out the lantern, and headed to his makeshift sleeping area. Tomorrow, he decided he would tackle that orchard door. Answers, whether comforting or disturbing, awaited him below ground. The next morning broke bright and hot, a stark contrast to the previous night's thunder rumbles. Andrew searched the barn for a heavier tool. He found a metal pry bar that, though rusted, seemed strong enough for his plan. He also grabbed a small flashlight and a coil of rope, stuffing them into a rucksack. With a thermos of water in hand, he set out across the field toward the orchard, determined to see if the rusted door led to one of the tunnels Townsend had written about. As he neared the orchard, he slowed, scanning for any signs that he was being watched. With Richard Townsend's sudden visit and Marvin's ominous hints, he'd grown more cautious. The orchard itself was silent, save for the rustling of leaves in the breeze. He paused briefly, checking behind a row of wild berry bushes, before stepping into the small clearing where the secret door was hidden. Kneeling by the metal hatch, he noticed it was more substantial than he remembered. It resembled a storm shelter entrance one might see in tornado-prone regions, except it lay practically flush with the ground. The rusty padlock had fused to the latch. So Andrew aimed the pry bar at the hinge side, hoping the corroded bolts would give. After several determined attempts, he finally heard a loud snap. The door popped ajar, and a waft of musty subterranean air rose to greet him. He hesitated, peering into the darkness. A set of stone steps led down, just visible in the limited daylight. They were damp, slick with moss, and disappeared into blackness. Pulling out his flashlight, Andrew eased himself onto the first step. The smell was earthy and stale, reminding him of a forgotten root cellar. Step by careful step, he descended, heart pounding. After about a dozen steps, he reached a small underground chamber carved out of stone and dirt. The walls dripped with condensation, and wooden support beams overhead looked ancient, with cobwebs draping their corners. At first glance, the room was empty, except for a pair of metal shelves which stood crookedly near one wall. One shelf held dusty containers, glass, flasks, and jars, some shattered, others sealed with rubber stoppers. A few had suspicious residues like congealed liquids that had long since solidified. Andrew stepped closer, gingerly picking up a jar. Faded lettering on the side read, "Specimen number 12." It was empty except for a dark crust at the bottom. Another jar was labeled H37 Extended Trials. He frowned. These labels matched the coded references in Harold's journal. This must have been one of the hidden storerooms for those mysterious experiments. He scanned for additional exits. Sure enough, on the far side of the chamber, a low archway framed a tunnel extending beyond. Before he could explore further, his flashlight beam caught something on the earthen floor, a small wooden crate with a broken lid. Inside were rotted cloth sacks, as if they once contained something granular. Andrew's pulse quickened. If there were more crates like this, it could be contraband. Yet no sign of actual valuables remained. It was as though this place had been thoroughly cleared out or perhaps moved long ago. Andrew weighed his options. He could continue down the tunnel, but the flashlight batteries were already weak and the tunnel's extent was unknown. On the other hand, turning back now would mean a sleepless night, wondering what lay beyond that passage. With a grim smile, he decided to venture at least a little farther. He tightened his backpack. Straps tested the flashlight's beam and ducked through the archway. The corridor was cramped, forcing him to stoop. Thick roots from orchard trees above had pierced the ceiling in places, forming a strange lattice of wooden veins overhead. The air felt colder, heavier, as if each breath brought him deeper into a realm that time had forgotten. The walls and floor were mostly packed earth, supported by planks in some areas. Occasionally he had spot flickers of old wiring, perhaps electric lines once rigged for clandestine activities. He counted his steps, trying to keep track in case he needed to navigate back blindly. After 30 or so steps, the tunnel widened into another small room. A single lantern hook protruded from the wall. Rusted chains lay on the ground, tangled as if abandoned in haste. Empty crates stood stacked in a corner marked with cryptic codes. Here, he noticed a faint stenciling on one crate that read, "Biosample fragile." Andrew's heartbeat thudded in his ears. He felt like a trespasser in a hidden lab, something out of a conspiracy thriller. He searched the space more thoroughly. Beneath a fallen plank, he discovered a sealed metal tube, about a foot long with a screw-on cap. Prizing it open, he found rolled-up documents inside old yellowed papers covered in dense handwriting and diagrams. A cursory glance revealed terms like genetic variation, accelerated growth, and trial phase. The name Townsend appeared multiple times along with scrawled references to volunteer recruits and side effects unknown. Andrew's mind reeled. This was no mere smuggling ring of alcohol or drugs. It pointed to a genuine scientific or medical endeavor. Stuffing the tube and its contents into his backpack, Andrew took a shaky breath. Could this be the product Harold Townsend was so secretive about, some sort of experimental formula or procedure? The notion both excited and horrified him. He recalled the repeated mention of experiments in the journal, but seeing it spelled out in these diagrams drove home the potential seriousness. If it involved unethical trials or something even darker, then Andrew had just uncovered evidence that might be explosive. His flashlight flickered, a sudden reminder of how unprepared he was. With only a single set of failing batteries, he had no guarantee the beam would last. He decided to head back, not wanting to risk losing light in a labyrinth of underground passages. As he retraced his steps, he tried not to imagine footsteps trailing behind him in the dark. Finally, he reached the orchard cellar. Climbing out into the open air felt like being resurrected. He closed the hatch as best he could and jammed a broken piece of wood against it. It wouldn't fool a determined intruder, but at least it might conceal the entrance from casual eyes. As Andrew trudged back to the farmhouse, the late afternoon sun flickered through orchard leaves. He clutched his backpack, mind swirling with the revelation that he had in his hands something more valuable and possibly more dangerous than a stash of cash. When he reached the farmhouse, Andrew went straight to the small dining room he used as his makeshift study. Carefully, he spread out the newly found documents on the table, weighting the curling corners with old metal tools. The scribbled handwriting was difficult to read, but certain phrases jumped out. Enhanced cell regeneration, potential military applications, and high-value negotiations. Lines sketched out strange chemical structures. Lists of test subjects included both animals and humans, identified by numbers, not names. It was a jarring discovery. The more Andrew read, the more convinced he became that Harold Townsend and his associates, the Brotherhood, had not just been smugglers. They were developing something, likely a compound with advanced medical or bioengineering possibilities. As he flipped through pages, a particular note pinned his attention. Partner conflict. Pierce threatening exposure if project goes beyond ethical boundaries. Pierce again, and talk of ethical boundaries. It implied at least one person involved had misgivings about the morality of their work. The final sheet in the bundle referenced an incident, though details were scarce except for one ominous line. After the incident, immediate shutdown, relocate assets, trust no one. Andrew's eyes widened. So that's why these tunnels and storerooms were abandoned? Something catastrophic or near catastrophic must have occurred, forcing Harold Townsend to stash or destroy evidence. Absorbed in the documents, Andrew barely noticed that night was falling. A sudden rap on the porch door made him jump, nearly toppling his chair. Heart pounding, he gathered the pages, hastily stuffing them back into the metal tube. Had Richard Townsend returned, or Marvin? With measured steps, he peered out the window. To his surprise, he saw a woman probably in her early 30s wearing boots and a utility jacket. She had auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She spotted him through the glass and waved in what looked like a friendly greeting. Cautious. Andrew opened the door, partway. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman smiled, though her eyes betrayed a seriousness. Hi, I'm Nicole Halston, Marvin's daughter. Thought I'd drop by and see if you needed assistance. Dad said you bought the old Townsend place. Her gaze flicked behind Andrew, taking in the battered interior. Also heard rumors that you might be in and over your head here. Andrew studied her carefully. Marvin had never mentioned a daughter, but that didn't mean much. He barely knew Marvin himself. It's not exactly a small project, Andrew admitted. Appreciate the offer, though. Was he worried about me? Nicole shrugged and leaned against the doorframe. He's a chronic worrier, always has been. But also we both know that house's reputation. It chews people up and spits them out. Figured it might be good to have a neighborly face around. Besides, I'm better at carpentry than I look. An uncertain silence followed. Andrew considered the documents hidden just out of sight. The orchard tunnel, the ominous references to illegal experiments. It was risky to let anyone in, but the alternative was more secrecy, more isolation, and he could use help patching up the farmhouse. He decided to let Nicole inside, fair warning. This place might be more hazardous than it appears, he said, stepping aside. She gave a wry grin. I've seen worse. Andrew cleared a chair for Nicole in the dining room, hastily moving a few stray tools. Though he didn't reveal the hidden tube of documents, he allowed her to see the general state of disrepair. Broken floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and a gaping hole in the ceiling, where years of water damage had left its mark. You weren't kidding, Nicole said softly. This house needs a full overhaul, but maybe we can prioritize the essentials. Safe floors, basic plumbing, a functional kitchen. He nodded, glad for her practical approach. I started on the porch and front locks. Next on my list is to seal off a section of the roof so we don't get new water damage every time it rains. Nicole smiled. Roofing, I can help with that. Been patching roofs since I was old enough to climb a ladder on Dad's farm. Her eyes lingered on some of the old furniture. You plan on keeping any of this? Could be antiques if refinished properly. Andrew shrugged. I might salvage a few pieces, but a lot of it is too far gone. Any big item you see is something I haven't gotten around to trashing or recycling yet. He paused, scrutinizing her expression. Listen, this might sound odd, but I've heard a lot of talk about the house's reputation. Do you or your dad have any specifics you can share? Or is it just the usual local lore? Ghost stories, curses, that sort of thing? Nicole sighed, folding her arms. Honestly, it's a bit of both. Growing up, I heard stories that Harold Townsend was experimenting with who knows what. Some said contraband, others said weird science. There were rumors of people coming to the farm at night, sometimes never leaving. Could be tall tales, but Dad told me once that he actually saw men in suits sneaking onto the property when he was young. Big black cars with out-of-state plates. She glanced at Andrew. Whatever truth there is, it was enough to scare off every buyer who tried to fix up the place. Mysterious break-ins, sabotage, and sometimes threats, if they poked around too much. A chill tingled down Andrew's spine. Has anyone ever found actual evidence? He tried to sound casual. Nicole shrugged. A few people claimed they found hidden rooms or weird items left behind, but none of them stayed. There was talk about a deeper conspiracy that the Townsend family wasn't just local landowners, but part of some bigger network. Then over the years, it all just faded into rumor. Her gaze fell on the battered table. I suspect you might have discovered something already. You look more rattled than just a typical homeowner dealing with rotten floorboards. Andrew nearly denied it, but something in her candor made him hesitate. If I did find something unusual, he said. Slowly, do you think your father or you would want to help? Or would you consider it too dangerous? Nicole's eyes gleamed with curiosity. I can't speak for my dad. He's more cautious, but me. I've never been one to run from a mystery. If you've got something real, not just rumors, then yeah, I'm in. Provided we keep each other safe, Andrew nodded. It was a risk to trust her, but in his gut he sensed Nicole was more genuine than most. And if these documents signaled something bigger than illegal shipments, like advanced bio-research, he'd need all the help he could get. All right, he said, maybe we can figure this out together. Early the next morning, Nicole returned accompanied by a beat-up pickup truck laden with basic roofing materials, shingles, tar paper, and a few tools. Andrew, who had just finished a quick breakfast of instant oatmeal, greeted her outside. For the next several hours, they worked side by side in the sweltering heat, scraping away ruined shingles, patching holes, and reinforcing the weakened sections of the roof's underlying structure. Despite the grueling labor, Andrew felt a surprising sense of camaraderie. It had been a long time since he'd done anything physical with someone who was both competent and easy to talk to. During a water break, they sat on the edge of the porch under a makeshift shade, sweaty and streaked with dirt. "Where'd you learn roofing?" Andrew asked, passing her a bottle of water. Nicole shrugged. "Dad insisted I learn every aspect of farm maintenance, fences, roofing, tractor repair, you name it. I complained a lot as a teenager, but it saved me countless repair bills as an adult." She took a swig of water, then cast him a sidelong glance. "What about you? You strike me as a city guy. This your first time tackling a project like this?" Andrew chuckled, nodding. "I grew up on a small farm but left for college and never looked back. My parents sold our land and I got swept up in finance corporate gigs chasing money." His face grew somber. "Then, well, the market tanked. I lost almost everything. Bought this place out of sheer desperation." Nicole examined him without judgment. "Sometimes desperation leads us to unexpected opportunities," she said quietly. "Though I don't know if this farm is an opportunity or a curse." The word curse hung in the air. Andrew thought about the orchard tunnel, the cryptic documents. "Time will tell," he murmured, standing up to resume work. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they hammered down shingles discussing favorite foods, local events, and how they each found the scorching heat more tolerable than a brutal winter. By late afternoon, they managed to secure a sizable section of the roof. It wasn't perfect, but it should protect the interior from immediate water damage. They wrapped up the day's work exhausted. Andrew offered to make a simple dinner with his limited supplies, canned soup and bread. Nicole smiled, agreeing. While he heated the soup on a small propane burner in the kitchen, she looked around the house, eventually drifting toward the second floor. "Mind, if I explore a bit," she called down. Andrew hesitated, then yelled back, "Go ahead, just be careful on the stairs." A few minutes later, as Andrew stirred the soup, he heard Nicole exclaim, "Whoa!" Hurried footsteps clattered, and she descended with something in her hands, a faded photograph. "Found this in a dresser drawer," she said, placing it on the table. The image depicted three men standing outside a large barn. One was unmistakably Harold Townsend. From the paintings and photos Andrew had seen, another was a stern-looking stranger. And the third? He wore a cap pulled low, but Andrew swore the face resembled the black and white portrait he'd noticed in the journal references. There was an inscription on the back: Townsend R. Smith and J. Pierce, 1961 brothers, in purpose. Andrew felt a surge of adrenaline. J. Pierce, a direct match to the name haunting the journal. Could this be the key to proving a family link? With shaky excitement, he pointed to the name. "That could be my relative. I've seen references in the old documents, but I didn't have a photo." Nicole leaned over, eyes wide. "So you were right. There's a Pierce connection to the Townsend farm. Looks like we just found more proof." After dinner, they settled in the dining room, the newly discovered photograph between them. Andrew finally mustered the courage to show Nicole the metal tube containing the orchard tunnel documents. He laid them out carefully, explaining how he'd found them, and mentioning, though in vague terms, the other references he'd come across. Nicole, eyes glued to the pages, let out a low whistle. "This is intense. They were messing around with some advanced biology or chemistry, it seems." Andrew nodded. "I'm no scientist, but terms like enhanced regeneration and military application raise huge red flags. This isn't typical contraband smuggling." She leafed through the diagrams, her brow furrowed. "It's as if they aim to develop a compound or drug that accelerates healing or modifies genetic structures. Could have legitimate medical uses, or it could be weaponized. Either way, it's big." They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the discovery weighing on them. Finally, Andrew tapped the photograph with his finger. "J. Pierce, I suspect that's James Pierce, maybe a great-uncle or cousin. If my mother's side was indeed related, that means my family was involved in this. But the journal entries suggest friction, like he wanted out, a moral dispute maybe." Nicole flipped one of the pages in the metal tube, and something called an incident forced them to abandon the farm's underground labs. After that, Harold Townsend apparently vanished, or at least disappeared from public life. Andrew remembered Richard Townsend's claim that Harold had indeed vanished. If Harold disappeared, maybe others did too. Or maybe they were silenced. "I need to find more concrete records, legal documents, newspaper clippings, something that might detail what actually happened here." Nicole tapped her chin thoughtfully. "The county archives might have something. Old property records, local news articles. My dad might know about specific events from that period, though he was probably a kid when it all went down." She hesitated. "If you want, we can check the archives together. A friend of mine, Kelsey, works at the county records office. She might let us sift through the older files without too much red tape." Andrew nodded, grateful for her willingness to help. The notion of an ally, someone who understood the stakes, felt like a lifeline. Yes, let's do it. The more we understand, the better. If these experiments were dangerous, or if there's still hidden property within that formula, it could attract the wrong kind of attention. At the mention of unwanted attention, both of them fell quiet, recalling Richard Townsend's visit. Andrew relayed that conversation. Nicole bit her lip. I've never met Richard personally, but I've heard he's quite influential with connections far beyond this county. If he thinks there's something left here worth finding, he won't back off easily. Andrew clenched his fists. Then we need to stay a step ahead. Whatever this formula or compound is, it could be used for good or evil. Harold's notes mention how profitable it could be, and that means powerful people might do anything to get it or to bury it forever. Nicole placed a reassuring hand on his. We'll figure it out. But we have to be careful. No announcements to the world until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Ready for a trip to the county archives tomorrow? Andrew met her gaze and mustered a determined smile. Absolutely, the sooner we shed light on this, the better. At sunrise the following day, Andrew and Nicole drove separately to Millbridge's county seat. The records office was housed in a squat brick building adjacent to the courthouse. A far cry from the stately government complexes Andrew was used to in the city. Nicole led the way, navigating the narrow hallways to a room crowded with filing cabinets and microfilm readers. An older woman at a desk, her hair pinned in a neat bun, looked up over her glasses. Nicole Halston, as I live and breathe, she said with a warm grin. What brings you here so bright and early? Hi, Kelsey. Nicole greeted. We're doing some research on the old Townsend farm. She glanced at Andrew. This is Andrew Pierce. He recently purchased the place. Kelsey's friendly expression tightened slightly. Townsend Farm, huh? Brave soul. I've got some old property records and news clippings we can pull. Not sure how thorough they are, though. A lot of documents went missing over the years. She retrieved a set of keys from a drawer and walked them through a narrow corridor to a locked door. Officially, this is for employees only. But I trust Nicole. Just don't go mixing up my files, she teased. Inside was a cramped, windowless space lined with metal shelves, crammed with manila folders and bound ledgers. The musty odor of aging paper enveloped them. Townsend materials should be in that corner, Kelsey indicated before stepping out. I'll be at my desk if you need me. Andrew and Nicole donned latex gloves from a dispenser on the wall, standard protocol for handling fragile documents. They began rifling through the boxes labeled by year. Eventually, they struck gold an entire folder marked Townsend Investigations and Reports, 1959 to 1965. They spread the contents on a makeshift desk. There were typed police reports about suspicious activities at the Townsend property. Caravans of unknown vehicles, nights of loud machinery. Witness statements mentioned buried crates and rumored labs. Another set of documents dated 1962 indicated a raid by local authorities, though it concluded with no evidence found. Oddly enough, a note at the bottom read, "Case closed, lack of probable cause." Nicole handed Andrew a thin sheaf of yellowed clippings, headline after headline. Townsend family under scrutiny for alleged illegal experiments. Local farmer denies involvement in mysterious vanishings, Brotherhood rumors, linked to national syndicate. One article included a grainy photograph, Harold Townsend in handcuffs. Though the caption explained charges were dropped due to insufficient proof, then they found a partially torn document referencing James Pierce. It was a short statement apparently recorded by law enforcement. James Pierce confirms presence of experimental contraband on Townsend premises. Requests, witness protection, investigation ongoing. The rest was missing. Andrew's pulse surged. So James Pierce had been a whistleblower, at least for a time. He tried to expose Harold Townsend, going so far as to request witness protection. But there was no further info on whether he received it. Looks like your hunch about a Pierce relative was spot on, Nicole said quietly, but reading over Andrew's shoulder. He might have been the one person on the inside who tried to stop the whole operation. Andrew flipped through more pages, but the trail seemed to end abruptly. One snippet from 1963 read, James Pierce withdrew statement, investigation ended. No explanation was given. Maybe he got bought off or threatened, and Andrew reasoned, recalling the hush money references in Harold's journal. The question was what became of him afterward. Nicole checked the final pages in the folder. No obituary, no mention of him leaving town. It's like he vanished. They exchanged uneasy glances. Someone or something had made sure that any deeper account of James Pierce's story disappeared along with him. After nearly 3 hours in the cramped archive room, Andrew and Nicole emerged with photocopies of the most relevant documents Kelsey gave them, a curious look as they thanked her. But she refrained from prying. Once outside, they leaned against Andrew's car in the parking lot, riffling through the papers in the bright morning sun. It's clear the Townsend farm was investigated multiple times, Andrew observed, but every probe got shut down or quietly dropped. Meanwhile, James Pierce, who tried to speak up, reversed his story. Then he vanished from the record, at least locally. Nicole folded her arms. It's a classic pattern. Money changes hands, evidence gets lost. The Brotherhood must have had deep pockets and connections. Maybe Richard Townsend inherited that network, or at least some of its ties. Andrew rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of unresolved questions pressing in. If James Pierce was family, maybe my mother never mentioned him out of fear or shame. Still, it's strange. If he got hush money, would he have fled? Lived under a new name? A flicker of resolve hardened in Andrew's expression. One thing's sure, a man doesn't just vanish off the face of the earth. The plan emerged almost naturally. They would keep digging, check official birth certificates, marriage and death records, even genealogical databases. Anything to clarify James Pierce's fate. But for now, they decided to return to the farm, regroup, and see if the orchard tunnel might reveal more. As they drove back, Nicole followed in her pickup. Andrew found himself feeling both determined and uneasy. Every new clue reinforced just how perilous this conspiracy might be. That feeling only intensified when, upon arriving at the gravel driveway, they found fresh tire tracks near the farmhouse. Tracks that didn't match either of their vehicles. Alarmed, Andrew parked and got out, cautiously scanning the area. Someone's been here. The tire marks looked like they belonged to a heavy SUV or truck. They led toward the barn and looped around, disappearing back down the driveway. Nicole hopped out of her pickup, eyes narrowing. Think it was Richard Townsend, or maybe Marvin. Andrew shook his head. Marvin's truck leaves narrower treads, and Townsend drove a sleek sedan. This is different. Possibly a third party. Anxiety gnawed at him. Could someone else in the Brotherhood circle be keeping tabs on the property? They searched the immediate vicinity. Nothing seemed obviously disturbed until Nicole noticed scuff marks on the barn door. It was slightly ajar. Heart pounding. Andrew stepped inside. The barn interior was just as they'd left it, but footprints in the dust formed a path to the corner where he had discovered the generator. The footprints led to the generator, circled it, and then stopped near a workbench. A few old tools lay scattered as if someone rummaged for something. Then nothing. Andrew exhaled sharply. They might have been searching for documents or valuables. Good thing we've stashed the tube inside the house, Nicole's brow knitted. With worry, this means they suspect you found something. They're looking for evidence, money or both. She shuddered. They might come back. Andrew nodded grimly. We'll have to be on guard. In the meantime, let's check the orchard hatch. That was the other place we left traces. See if it's been tampered with. They walked in tense silence, crossing the overgrown field. Upon reaching the orchard, Andrew scanned for footprints. Sure enough, fresh tracks trampled grass near the hidden hatch. The piece of wood he'd used to block the door was tossed aside, and the rusted metal hatch stood slightly open. Nicole crouched, shining a flashlight. They pried it open. Must have gone down there. Andrew felt a surge of dread. Whoever it was, they knew about the tunnel network. Had they found the metal tube's hiding place? Worse, had they stumbled on some other stash that Andrew and Nicole hadn't discovered yet? With the orchard hatch compromised, the entire property felt violated. Nicole stepped back. If they know about the tunnels, we can't rely on stealth alone. We need a plan, security cameras, or at least some basic traps. Andrew nodded, breathing heavily. Agreed. But first, we should see if they left anything behind or if they took something. He paused, weighing the risk. We should go down. But let's be quick and prepared. They exchanged determined glances. The orchard tunnel beckoned once more, a silent labyrinth that might hold the final pieces of the Townsend puzzle or lead them further into danger. Andrew Pierce and Nicole Halston stood at the edge of the orchard hatch, staring down into the yawning darkness. Both felt the weight of the previous day's revelations, a secret break-in on Andrew's property, footprints in the barn, and the possibility that the same unknown party had ventured into these underground tunnels. They wore headlamps, carried extra batteries, and each had a sturdy flashlight in hand. Andrew had also tucked a small crowbar into his belt, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. Ready? Nicole asked, casting a wary glance at the orchard's twisted, overgrown branches overhead. Despite the bright morning sun, the area around the hatch seemed eerily hushed. Andrew swallowed, nodding. Let's be quick and thorough. I want to see if they left any clues behind or took something we haven't found yet. One by one, they descended the slick steps, the musty air growing denser. With each step, Andrew felt that same electric tension he'd experienced on his first visit below. Only this time, he was accompanied by someone he trusted. Their headlamps cut neat cones of light through the subterranean gloom, illuminating walls braced with old timbers and tattered wiring. A chill seeped into Andrew's bones despite the summer heat above ground. When they reached the first chamber, Andrew shone his flashlight around, noticing new scuff marks in the dirt. These footprints look recent, he observed boot soles. I'd guess. Nicole crouched, running her fingers lightly over the disturbed earth. Could be from last night or early this morning. Definitely not ours. She pointed to the shelves along the wall. One of them was toppled, several jars and flasks strewn on the floor. Broken glass glinted under their headlamps. They were searching for something. Andrew murmured, recalling how meticulously he'd left the shelves during his last visit. He stepped gingerly over shards, kneeling beside a small metal box that lay open and empty. It looked like an old army surplus container, and the inside had been scoured clean. I didn't even see this box before, he added. They must have known exactly where to look. Nicole bit her lip. Or they were just systematic, opening anything that looked like a container. Either way, it's gone now. They checked the corners of the chamber, finding no further signs of hidden items. Everything else had been left as debris, as if whomever had come through only cared about one specific thing. Next, they headed down the tunnel toward the second room, where Andrew had discovered the metal tube of documents. They both felt a spike of apprehension. If the intruder had found more documents, the knowledge could be used in dangerous ways. But upon arriving, they found the space much as Andrew had left it, except for muddy footprints crisscrossing the floor. Crates remained stacked in the corner, and the broken chains still lay on the ground. Nicole hurried to the spot where Andrew had first grabbed the tube, her beam searching for any sign of disturbance. A slight indentation in the dusty floor suggested someone knelt there, but other than that, the area looked untouched. Andrew's breath eased a little. At least they didn't find our stash. We moved the tube to the house. Could be. They assumed we'd already cleared everything. Nicole nodded, tension evident in her posture, which means they might check the rest of the tunnels or the house again. We have to assume they'll return. They aren't done. They continued deeper, searching for any additional chambers or corridors that might have been revealed by the mysterious intruder. Their combined flashlight beams flickered across the earthen walls until they dead-ended at a collapsed section where old timbers had fallen and dirt stones and rotted wood formed a barricade that looked decades old. Andrew tapped the debris with his crowbar. No way through here. If there's more, it's beyond this collapse. Nicole exhaled, wiping sweat from her brow. We've seen enough. Let's head back. This place feels like a trap now. Andrew nodded, sharing her sense of creeping danger. As they made the careful ascent to daylight, both wondered if they'd just inherited a feud that started decades ago, and which clearly wasn't over. Back at the farmhouse, Andrew and Nicole settled in the dining room, the tension from the tunnel exploration still coursing through them. Andrew shut the door behind them, twisting the new lock he'd installed. Let's brainstorm our next steps. He began pulling a notepad from a drawer. We can't just keep stumbling around in the dark, waiting for intruders to show up. Nicole nodded, grim. Agreed, we need some actual security measures. Cameras, motion sensors, something that alerts us if anyone returns. She tapped the notepad. I can reach out to a friend who sets up basic systems on farm properties. It won't be cutting edge, but it'll give us warnings. That'll help. Andrew jotted down basic security system under a bullet point. Would. Also, I'm thinking we need more info on the Townsend family, especially Richard. He clearly suspects we found something, or else he wouldn't have visited. Nicole frowned, crossing her arms. I've never known Richard to be physically aggressive, but he's known to hire people who do the dirty work for him. Those tire tracks. Maybe he sent a private investigator or hired muscle to sniff around. Andrew flipped through the photocopies they'd brought from the county archives. His name barely appears in the older documents. It seems Harold was the main figure. Richard might have been a teenager or younger at the time. If he's inherited any network, it might be through extended connections. Old Brotherhood members, government contacts, who knows? They fell silent, contemplating the magnitude of the operation behind these decades-old experiments. Andrew recalled the cryptic chemical notations, the references to enhanced regeneration, and the notion that James Pierce had tried to blow the whistle. If the compound truly existed, the money at stake would be astronomical enough to drive people to murder or blackmail. Eventually, Nicole cleared her throat. If your ancestor or relative James Pierce was a key whistleblower, maybe your own family has more clues, old letters, hidden diaries that never made it to the archives. She hesitated. What about your mother? Do you think she'd know anything? Andrew stared at the floor, realizing how estranged he'd grown from his remaining family. His mother had always been distant about her relatives, particularly her father's generation. It's worth a try, he admitted, but we haven't spoken much since I lost my finances. She's not exactly supportive or trusting after everything that happened. Still, I might reach out, though I doubt she'll share anything unless I push. Nicole offered a sympathetic look. Sometimes parents hide things because they're trying to protect us or themselves. But if James Pierce was involved in something so significant that he vanished, your mother might know at least part of the story. Andrew rubbed his temples. It's risky, but it might be the only way to fill in the gaps. If I can confirm that James Pierce was my great-uncle or grandfather's cousin, then I'll have a stronger sense of how all this ties back to me. A quiet determination settled over them. They had a plan, bolster security, continue digging into both the Townsend family and Andrew's own lineage, and remain vigilant for any signs that the intruder would return. Outside, the day's sun peaked, bathing the overgrown fields in a deceptively peaceful light, yet Andrew felt the unspoken question prickling at his mind. When the truth finally surfaces, who else will come knocking? They spent the rest of the afternoon rigging up rudimentary security. Nicole's friend Jake arrived with a pickup loaded with cables, cameras, and a small generator-powered control box. He was in his late 20s, sporting a ball cap and a ready grin that belied his technical expertise. Under Nicole's direction, Jake installed motion sensor lights around the barn and orchard. He placed trail cameras popular among hunters along key approaches to the property, each fitted with night vision. Andrew assisted wherever he could, carrying gear and climbing ladders to mount cameras high enough to deter tampering. He realized how unusual it was to see the farm brimming with activity, especially positive, purposeful work. So much of his time here had been spent on solitary repairs or covert explorations. Having help felt like a temporary relief from the shadows. By dusk, they linked the cameras to a simple monitor system installed in a corner of the dining room. Jake demonstrated how the motion sensors would trigger footage, storing it on a local hard drive. It's not foolproof, he admitted, but it'll at least let you know if someone's creeping around, if they have advanced jamming gear, or if they're determined enough they can still bypass it. But most trespassers aren't that sophisticated. Andrew thanked him, paying for the equipment with part of the attic cash he'd been relying on for farm repairs. It stung a bit to see his reserves dwindle, but the sense of security felt worth the cost. Jake left soon after tipping his cap. Nicole lingered, her eyes fixed on the newly installed monitor. The screen showed flickering feeds from different cameras, the barn, orchard, hatch, porch, and driveway. We'll see if it catches anything tonight, she said. One less thing to keep us awake. Andrew managed a tight smile. Yeah, one less. But there's still the matter of the hidden labs, the stolen research, and a mysterious formula that might change everything. Not exactly restful thoughts. She exhaled, her expression serious. We can only do so much in one day. Tomorrow we keep digging. Maybe we pay Marvin a visit. He's known this land for decades. Plus he might have insight into Richard Townsend's movements. Or we start contacting old acquaintances of Harold's. Andrew nodded, though part of him balked at the idea of involving more locals. We have to tread carefully. The more people we ask, the more rumors we stir up. If someone was stealthy enough to break in and rummage underground, they probably have ears everywhere. Nicole approached the window, looking at the farmhouse yard bathed in twilight. Then we'll plan our conversation selectively. I'll talk to my father first. See if he knows anything about suspicious vehicles in the area. You can speak with your mother. See if she reveals even a snippet of family lore. Meanwhile, we'll keep watch. In that moment, Andrew realized how deeply they'd become partners in this clandestine investigation. It was no longer just about him unraveling the secrets of the Townsend farm. Nicole was equally invested, perhaps out of curiosity or loyalty to her father's old neighborhood or something else. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Andrew felt a pulse of gratitude toward her. He wasn't alone in this darkness. Early the next morning, Andrew called his mother from a quiet corner of the farmhouse. He hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year, not since he declared bankruptcy and lost his upscale condo. The phone rang longer than he expected before her weary voice answered. Andrew, it's been a while. He swallowed, feeling a pang of regret. Hi, Mom, I know. Sorry I haven't called. There was a pause and he braced for a barrage of guilt or disapproval. Instead, she simply asked, "Are you all right?" His chest tightened. "I'm okay. I'm living in a farmhouse. I bought kind of a fixer-upper. I need to ask you something about the Pierce side of the family." She let out a slow exhale. "Oh, haven't heard you mention them in ages." Andrew launched into a careful explanation. He had come across references to a James Pierce from decades ago who might be related. He avoided the specifics of contraband or shady experiments, merely noting that James was tied to the prior owners, the Townsends. The silence on the other end was thick. He imagined his mother's face tense, eyes downcast, a habit she'd had when a topic turned uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know much about him. My father rarely talked about that branch of the family. I remember hearing that James was an older cousin who got in trouble. He was rumored to be involved with things that weren't legal. Then he disappeared. No one would say where it was, like the family just closed ranks and pretended he never existed." Andrew's pulse quickened, confirming the hush money and vanishing act. "So you never met him?" "No," she said, voice subdued. "I only recall seeing a single faded photograph in my father's desk, James Pierce, standing next to an older man in front of a barn. When I asked, I was told to leave it alone." Andrew sensed the moment slipping, the old defenses creeping back into her tone. "Mom, do you still have that photo? If so, it might help me piece together some family history. I know it's random, but it matters to me." She hesitated. "I might. Dad passed years ago and I boxed up all his belongings. They're in storage in my attic, but Andrew, be careful. Your grandfather didn't want that part of the family dredged up. He used to say they were dangerous men." Despite the spike of anxiety, Andrew pressed on. "Any chance you could check your attic? If it's there, maybe scan it for me or mail it. I'll pay for shipping. I just want to see if it's the same barn from the Townsend property." A heavy pause followed. Then at last she replied, "All right, I'll look, but Andrew, promise me you're not doing something reckless again. We can't afford another fiasco financially or otherwise." He sighed. "I promise I'm trying to do this right. I just need some answers." They ended the call with a guarded truce. Andrew leaned against the wall, letting the tension seep out. She would search for the photo. A small but crucial step. In the back of his mind, a deeper question stirred. What if James Pierce's fate was also his own? Could he be following in the footsteps of a relative who dared to challenge dangerous forces only to vanish? Meanwhile, Nicole met with her father, Marvin Halston, back on his adjoining farm. The Halston land looked like a painting of pastoral calm. Rolling fields, neat rows of crops, and a stout red barn that looked almost new. Marvin was tinkering with a tractor near a shed. "Hey, Dad," Nicole greeted, scanning the yard for any sign of suspicious vehicles. "Got a minute?" Marvin wiped his hands on a rag, eyeing her with concern. "Everything all right, Pumpkin? You've been spending a lot of time at the Townsend place." His tone carried both paternal worry and a hint of curiosity. She nodded. "That's what I need to talk to you about. The house. The property. There's more going on than we realized." Carefully, Nicole shared an edited version of the story, omitting the most damning details about advanced research or shady experiments. She focused instead on the break in the orchard hatch and Andrew's discovery of old documents indicating the Townsends had run some kind of secretive operation. Marvin's expression darkened. He stared at the horizon for a moment. "I had suspicions. Sure, folks whispered about that place my whole life, saw men in fancy suits come by when I was a kid. But I didn't poke around, figured nothing good could come of messing with the Townsends." Nicole pressed gently. "What about Richard Townsend? Did you know him personally?" Marvin's brow furrowed briefly years ago. He was polite enough but never gave straight answers. Came around after Harold vanished. Poking neighbors for info. Then he disappeared too, off to a bigger city. Whenever he reappeared, it was usually to settle legal disputes about the land or to scare off potential buyers. He sighed. Folks said he was trying to keep the property in limbo. Maybe he was waiting for something. Nicole relayed the presence of new tire tracks and footprints, possibly belonging to a hired operative. "Dad, have you noticed any unfamiliar vehicles around big SUV or truck?" Marvin paused, considering. "Might have. Yesterday afternoon, I spotted a dark SUV heading down the old side road that eventually loops near your orchard. Thought it was just a lost tourist. But come to think of it, the driver looked like he knew where he was going. Kept checking something on his phone." Nicole's pulse quickened. "That's probably them. They snuck onto Andrew's property." Marvin threw the rag onto the tractor's wheel, frustration simmering. "That farm's trouble, I've always said so. It's got secrets that keep calling people back. He fixed her with a worried gaze. You be careful, Nicole. I know you want to help, but folks who go snooping around the Townsend place tend to regret it. She stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. I will, Dad, but Andrew's in the middle of it now. He didn't ask for these secrets. He just bought a rundown farm trying to restart his life. Marvin shook his head, exhaling heavily. You'd best watch each other's backs. If Townsend or his cronies are sniffing around again, they won't hesitate to do what's necessary to protect their interests. With that ominous note, Nicole nodded, thanking him for his warning. As she returned to Andrew's property, she felt an even stronger resolve. If the Townsends or some remaining members of the Brotherhood were back in play, Andrew would need allies, and she intended to be one no matter the risk. Late that afternoon, Andrew was tinkering with the generator near the barn when he heard Nicole's truck rumble up. She parked, got out, and strode over with a determined stride. Just talk to my dad, she said, eyes flicking toward the orchard. He saw a dark SUV heading in that direction yesterday. Andrew wiped his hands on a rag, the faint smell of oil clinging to him. So it's definitely not random. They were coming here. He sighed, stepping away from the generator. Any luck with him remembering more about the Townsends? Nicole relayed Marvin's recollections of Richard Townsend's sporadic appearances. He's convinced Richard or someone under him is behind this. I can't say I disagree. Andrew pulled off his work gloves, gazing across the yard, where the new security cameras peered back like silent sentinels. Well, if they come again, we'll at least catch them on camera. He hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. I talked to my mother. She might have a photo of James Pierce, the relative who was wrapped up in all this. If she finds it, we might confirm how deep this family connection runs. Nicole nodded thoughtfully. That's a good lead. In the meantime, what do we do about the orchard tunnel? Board it up. Set traps. Andrew let out a tense laugh. I'm tempted, but if we seal it, we lose the chance to see if they return. If we watch it discreetly, we could catch them in the act. She gave him a sharp look. Concern evident and risk a confrontation in a dark tunnel. This isn't some game, Andrew. They could be armed. He ran a hand through his hair. I know you're right, but I hate sitting idle while someone potentially robs or sabotages my property. Plus, there might be more evidence or stashes thereafter, like the metal box. We saw them open. Nicole exhaled. We need backup or at least a safe plan. If we stake it out, we should do it from outside the hatch where we have an escape route. We can call the sheriff if we see suspicious activity. Andrew paused, remembering the historical allegations that local authorities were paid off. But that was decades ago, and times might have changed. Okay, I'll consider that. As they spoke, the sky began to darken. Another late summer storm rolled in, thunder rumbling in the distance. Nicole glanced up. Let's get inside before we're soaked. We can monitor the cameras from there. If any intruder is foolish enough to come in a storm, we'll see them. The two retreated to the farmhouse. Rain started to pelt the windows just as they stepped in, the wind picking up. The new monitor flickered to life, showing 4 camera angles. They settled in for a watchful evening, the ambient lamplight casting shadows on the worn walls. Lightning flashed momentarily, revealing the orchard in stark relief on the monitor. Andrew thought about the swirl of events, a clandestine lab, a missing relative, hush money, and a dangerous formula that might still exist somewhere. He wondered if he had any real chance of restoring this farm to simple, honest farmland, or whether it would forever remain a battleground for secret agendas. Nicole's presence, steady beside him, was the one anchor in all this turbulence. As thunder rattled the house, he found himself grateful for her partnership, even if neither of them could fully predict the tempest they'd been drawn into. Rain battered the farmhouse roof throughout the night, lightning illuminating the fields in jagged bursts. Despite the raging storm, the security monitors showed only shifting shadows and swaying tree branches. Andrew and Nicole dozed in shifts, rousing at each crash of thunder to check the screens. Thankfully, no intruders appeared. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the farm drenched and the driveway awash in puddles. Andrew woke stiff-necked from sleeping on the couch. He found Nicole in the kitchen, brewing coffee on the small propane stove. No movement after you fell asleep, she said, handing him a steaming mug. Either they're lying low or they never came back. Andrew sipped the bitter coffee gratefully. We'll keep the cameras rolling. In the meantime, let's press forward. I'd like to check the barn thoroughly. Maybe we missed a hidden compartment or something else that explains why they searched in there. Nicole nodded. I'm all for that. Also, how's the attic stash? You still comfortable keeping everything up there? He shrugged. It's hidden under a loose floorboard. We might want a better spot, though. If anyone scours the house, they could stumble on it. They devised a plan to relocate the metal tube documents and the stash of money to a place less obvious. First, they finished their coffee and got to work rummaging through the barn. Nicole started with the loft where broken bales of hay and an old feed trough lay scattered. Andrew focused on the walls and floor, tapping each plank for hollow sounds. The morning sun slanted through gaps in the barn siding, illuminating dust motes in golden beams. After about an hour, Nicole called down from the loft. I found something weird. Andrew climbed the rickety ladder, joining her near a far corner. Her flashlight pointed to a rectangular patch of boards that appeared newer than the rest. Looks like a secret compartment, maybe, she said. Andrew tested the planks with his pry bar. With minimal resistance, a small hatch lifted, revealing a shallow space below. Inside lay a single item, a worn ledger book. He pulled it out carefully, brushing off cobwebs. The cover bore no title, just a faint imprint of initials, HT. They carried the ledger downstairs to better light. Opening it revealed pages of handwritten entries, dates, amounts of money, references to shipments labeled with letters and numbers. It was a financial log of sorts, but the coded notations hinted at illicit dealings. Some columns were marked R, some M, and others P. Nicole's eyes widened as she flipped a page. This must be Harold Townsend's master ledger, a record of transactions for contraband or those experiments. Look at these sums. They're huge even by today's standards. 50,000 here, 75,000 there. Andrew set his jaw. This is bigger than just local smuggling. These numbers suggest large-scale funding, maybe a national or international operation. That's likely why the investigations were shut down. Too much money exchanged hands. On the final page, a note read, "Last deposit secured in Orchard facility. Secondary funds moved to Cellar Vault. Pierce threatened exposure but took payoff. Insurance remains undisclosed." Andrew and Nicole exchanged charged glances. Pierce had taken hush money, but apparently kept some insurance hidden. Could that be the Orchard Tunnel, or something else? It mentions a cellar vault, Nicole said. We haven't found any vault near the house's cellar, just the orchard hatch. Maybe there's another hidden area in the farmhouse basement. Andrew's mind whirled with possibilities. They'd discovered so many secrets already, yet it felt like they were only peeling back the top layer of a labyrinth. We'll check the cellar next, he said, adrenaline coursing through him. If there's a vault or chamber we missed, that might be where the real stash is and the real danger. The farmhouse cellar was dark, damp, and cluttered with decades of discarded junk. Rusted lawn chairs, broken crates, fragments of old shelving. Andrew and Nicole descended carefully, each armed with a flashlight. The stone walls glistened with moisture, and the smell of mildew hung in the air. They had done a cursory glance down here before, but never a systematic search. Now, armed with the clue from Harold's ledger referencing a cellar vault, they suspected there might be a hidden compartment or bricked-over entrance. They split up methodically, examining each wall. Nicole tapped stones with the handle of a small hammer, listening for hollow spots. Andrew crouched near the floor, running his hand along the base of the walls. After several minutes, Nicole called out, "This corner feels strange." She was at the far back where the cellar's overhead beams disappeared into gloom. Andrew hurried over, shining his flashlight. A wooden panel covered part of the stone foundation secured by nails that looked far newer than the rest of the cellar's construction. Nicole pried at one edge and the board gave slightly, revealing a gap. A cautious tug pulled the entire panel loose, exposing a recess in the wall about 4 feet high and 3 feet wide, bricked up except for a single iron door in the center. The door's latch and hinges were rusted, but its outline was distinct. Andrew's heart pounded. A secret door within the foundation. This must be it. The vault. He tested the iron handle, but it refused to budge. Rust flaked away as he jiggled it. Nicole stood beside him, hammer in hand. "Stand back," she said. With a few forceful blows at the handle and hinge, the corroded metal snapped, echoing in the cramped cellar. Andrew yanked again and the door creaked open. A wave of stale air billowed out, thick with the scent of earth and neglect. Crouching, they peered inside. The space was a small chamber carved into the foundation, large enough for a person to crawl into if they ducked low. Andrew went first, flashlight, revealing dusty shelves stacked with metal tins, old wooden boxes, and a battered steel cabinet. Nicole followed, shining her beam along the walls. Looks like it's sealed all around, no secondary exits. Andrew carefully opened one of the metal tins, half expecting moldy money or rotted papers. Instead, he found test tubes and foam holders, each labeled with the cryptic codes like LB7, LB72, and serum. A jolt of shock rushed through him. This matched the references in Harold's notes about a formula, an experimental compound. Nicole gingerly picked up a test tube, peering at the dried residue inside. Think it's the leftover from their regeneration experiments. Andrew nodded gravely. Must be, we've got old samples. Could still be hazardous. He set the tin aside, opening another wooden box. Inside were notebooks thick with scribbled chemical formulas and diagrams of plant cross-sections. The margins were filled with frantic notes. Accelerated healing observed. Potential aggression in subject number 14. Containment protocols. Nicole's voice trembled slightly. This is huge. It's real proof of advanced biomedical research. If it got into the wrong hands, she trailed off, eyes darting to the orchard tunnel in memory of the break-in. Andrew found a small locked drawer in the steel cabinet. Using a screwdriver, he pried it open, revealing a set of old Polaroid photos. His hands shook as he flipped through them, images of men in lab coats, a few test subjects with bandaged limbs, and ominous pictures of an underground chamber, likely the orchard facility they'd already explored. One Polaroid froze his heart, a man labeled James Pierce in pen, standing beside a younger Harold Townsend. James wore a grim expression, and the photo's background was the very orchard hatch Andrew had discovered. The final Polaroid showed a large sealed crate with the word insurance scrawled in black marker. Andrew's breath caught. So James Pierce's hush money might have been accompanied by a backup plan, a crate containing either the compound or something else that threatened the entire brotherhood, if they crossed him. Setting the photos aside, Andrew turned to Nicole, who was scanning the test tubes. We can't just keep this here. If intruders come, they could grab it all. Nicole nodded carefully, replacing the tubes exactly. But we also can't destroy it without understanding what's truly at stake. This might be medically groundbreaking, or it might be lethal. We need legitimate experts, people we can trust to evaluate it. But how do we find them without drawing the wrong attention? Andrew felt the weight of the question. They had uncovered far more than a secret vault of money. This was potentially revolutionary science carried out in the shadows. If they revealed it haphazardly, corporate vultures or government interests might swoop in, repeating history's mistakes. If they kept it hidden, they'd always be looking over their shoulders for the next break-in. All the while, the echoes of James Pierce's storyline hovered. He had tried to blow the whistle, only to vanish. Would Andrew share that fate if he chose the path of disclosure? They decided to move the vault contents carefully to a more secure location in the farmhouse, a locked closet on the second floor where they could at least monitor anyone going in and out. Over the next 2 hours, they shuttled the tube's notebooks and the steel cabinet's contents up from the cellar. With each trip, Andrew's anxiety deepened. Any observer could see them carrying boxes and wonder what they were up to. But leaving the vault full of incriminating evidence felt even more dangerous. When they finally stacked everything in the upstairs closet, Nicole barricaded the door with a new padlock they'd purchased at the hardware store. She tested it, rattling the handle. It's not a fortress, but it'll slow someone down, she remarked. Then pressing her back against the wall, she exhaled. We're in over our heads, Andrew. This is real biotech, not just old whiskey in hidden crates. Andrew sank onto the creaky bed frame in the adjacent bedroom. Tell me about it. I can't help thinking about how James Pierce tried to get out. Maybe that's why he vanished, because the Brotherhood wouldn't let him walk away. Harold Townsend's ledger shows massive sums of money. They could afford serious enforcement. Nicole stepped closer, lowering her voice. We might need to go public. Not necessarily shouting from the rooftops, but contacting a reputable journalist or an academic lab with the authority to handle and test these substances. If we let the right people know, it becomes harder for any one entity, like Richard Townsend, or some clandestine group to bury the truth or harm us. Andrew met her eyes. That's risky. We'd be igniting a media firestorm. The property could be swarmed by law enforcement, or we could get sued by the Townsend family. Not to mention, if the formula is as significant as these notes suggest, corporations will scramble to patent or weaponize it, she sighed. I know. None of the options are safe, but we have to do something. We can't sit here indefinitely waiting for the next break-in while we piece together partial truths. Time is on their side. Her phone buzzed before Andrew could respond. Nicole glanced at the screen. Unknown number, she muttered. She answered cautiously, stepping into the hallway. Andrew overheard only her side of the conversation, short, tense responses. What do you want? Yes, I'm here. No, you listen. After a moment, she hung up, face pale. That was Richard Townsend. Andrew stood. He called your number. Nicole nodded, swallowing hard. He said it wasn't hard to get, and he wants a meeting tonight near the old feed store on Route 12. Claims he just wants to talk to avoid misunderstandings. Told me to bring you. Andrew's gut churned. Did he say what would happen if we don't show Nicole? Drew in a shaky breath. He implied we'd regret ignoring him. Sounded like a threat, but couched in polite language. They stood there absorbing the gravity of the summons. If Townsend knew enough to threaten them, he might suspect they'd uncovered the Orchard Tunnel, the hidden vault, or both. Meeting him could be a trap, but refusing might provoke an even more desperate move on his part. Andrew rested a hand on the closet door that concealed the farm's greatest secrets. We can't walk into his arms blind, but maybe we can learn what he wants, and if there's a way to put an end to this. Nicole nodded, determination flaring. Then we meet on our terms, not his. We choose the place or we bring backup. We can't let him corner us. As dust settled, Andrew and Nicole drove separately toward Route 12, each vehicle loaded with caution and anxiety. They'd messaged Richard Townsend back using a burner phone, a precaution recommended by Nicole's tech-savvy friend Jake, insisting on a public location. Rather than the secluded feed store, they chose the lit parking lot of an all-night diner along the highway. Richard had agreed, though, with what felt like an icy reluctance in his curt text reply. The diner's neon sign flickered as Andrew pulled in. It was the kind of place frequented by truckers with a few big rigs parked along the edge. Nicole arrived a minute later, and they parked side by side. A quick glance confirmed they each carried their phones, kept on silent, but ready to call for help if needed. Before they could exit their cars, a sleek black SUV rolled into the lot, headlights sweeping across the dingy diner walls. It parked under a flickering lamppost. Andrew's pulse thumped as he saw Richard Townsend step out, impeccably dressed in dark slacks and a tailored jacket. Even from a distance, Townsend's posture radiated confidence, as if he owned the place. Andrew and Nicole exchanged a final determined look, then approached Townsend. The older man offered a polite nod. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I'd prefer we speak inside, away from prying ears. He gestured toward the diner entrance. Andrew found it ironic that Townsend wanted privacy in a public spot, but he followed nonetheless, trusting that the presence of other customers might deter any overt violence. The bell above the diner's door jingled as they entered. A bored waitress behind the counter waved them to a booth. They settled into the vinyl seats with Townsend on one side, Andrew and Nicole on the other. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The place smelled of stale coffee and fried onions. After they ordered coffee, Townsend leaned forward. Let's be frank, you've undoubtedly discovered things in that farmhouse, items that belong to my family's estate. His voice was smooth yet edged with threat. Andrew forced a calm expression. The only things I discovered are a rundown property and some old junk. If you mean documents or money, the house was sold as is. Anything inside is legally mine. Townsend's eyes narrowed. I'm not here to debate property law. My concern is the potential damage certain materials could do if made public. I'm prepared to offer a generous sum if you hand them over, no questions asked. Nicole exchanged a quick look with Andrew. So Townsend wanted to buy back the farm's secrets, she spoke up. We know there's more at stake than money. Harold Townsend's records indicate illegal experimentation, advanced compounds. This isn't just about family heirlooms. Townsend's mouth tightened. You have no idea the scope of those experiments or the context in which they occurred. Releasing any of that data recklessly would invite corporate predators, government, spooks, forces that would exploit the technology. My uncle's final wish was to keep it from such hands. Andrew felt a sharp pang of confusion. Harold wanted to hide it. His journals make it sound like he was the ringleader. A flicker of emotion crossed Townsend's face. He was at first, but near the end he realized how dangerous it was, especially after certain incidents. Nicole leaned forward, pressing her advantage. What happened to James Pierce? He tried to expose Harold's operation, then vanished. Townsend's gaze shifted, revealing a rare glimpse of discomfort. Pierce overstepped. He threatened everything the Brotherhood had built. There was a confrontation, hush money was paid, and he left town. What became of him afterward, I can't say for sure. My uncle suspected he fled west. Changed his name. Andrew's stomach knotted at the realization that James Pierce might have lived in hiding or possibly been silenced. And the compound, is it real? Does it genuinely accelerate healings, or is it more sinister? Townsend's voice dropped. Both. It can do remarkable things if properly developed, but the side effects are catastrophic in certain cases. Without thorough ethical research, it's a Pandora's box. My uncle believed no one could be trusted with it. Nicole's coffee arrived, and she took a sip, never breaking eye contact. Then why try to buy it back from us? If you think no one should have it, why not let us destroy it? For the first time, Townsend seemed to falter, because I also recognized the potential for good. My uncle's last notes to me suggested a safe path might exist, but it has to be done quietly under controlled conditions. Otherwise, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past. Andrew mulled his words. You want to continue the research, but quietly. That doesn't guarantee it won't be weaponized or sold. Townsend's knuckles whitened as he gripped the coffee cup, which is why it must be kept under family control, away from prying entities. You think going public is safer? Every pharmaceutical giant and intelligence agency will pounce. There'd be no stopping it. Silence gripped the booth. Andrew exchanged a glance with Nicole. If Townsend was sincere about ethical caution, maybe he wasn't just the villain they'd assumed, but could they trust him to shepherd the research responsibly? They also remembered the break-in, the threatening phone call. He was no saint. At last, Townsend slid a sealed envelope across the table. Here's my offer. You walk away. Pretend you never found anything. I take custody of the materials and see that they're either destroyed or researched properly under watchful eyes. Your call. Andrew opened the envelope just enough to glimpse a large cashier's check. He felt the weight of the moment. This was the payoff, like hush money to James Pierce in a modern form. Accepting it would solve his financial woes instantly, but at what moral cost? Looking back, Andrew Pierce realized the greatest treasures aren't always gold or hidden cash. They're courage, integrity, and the wisdom gained from daring to face the unknown. After surviving break-ins, confrontations, and discovering long-hidden family secrets, Andrew and Nicole stood victorious, determined to handle the astonishing discovery responsibly. They knew the power they'd uncovered could either heal thousands or bring untold danger if it fell into greedy hands. In true American spirit, Andrew chose the high road, safeguarding the knowledge for the greater good and proving once again that it's never too late to rebuild your life from rock bottom. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Andrew's remarkable journey. Would you have done the same in his boots? Comment below with your opinions and experiences. Let's discuss, because sometimes life's greatest challenges turn ordinary men into heroes.